Welcome esteemed panelists, audience, to the Bharat Shiksha Sankalp webinar series. Today, I'm Abhinav Sharma, your host for today, and also the Executive Director of Global Events at Eduverse Summit. Today, we have gathered here to discuss a very important topic in terms of the Indian education system, the EdTech revolution in India, transforming learning and teaching. So we have gathered here to sow the seeds of wisdom and knowledge that will cultivate the education landscape of tomorrow. Before I proceed, let me give a brief introduction about Bharat Shiksha Sankalp, what this idea is. Bharat Shiksha Sankalp is our commitment to the education enlightenment of India. This initiative is a catalyst for change, bringing together innovative minds to discuss and develop strategies that will propel our education system into a future of excellence and inclusivity. Now, as I proceed, I also want to invite, as our audience joins in, to please share your curiosities and inquiries in the chat box and the Q&A section. Your engagement will enrich our collective learning experience. So now I have the privilege to introduce our distinguished speakers, starting with Dr. Upasana Mahanta. With her illustrious career as an academic and legal educator, she has been instrumental in elevating the standards of legal education and outreach at OP Jindal Global University. Her scholarly work and dedication to pedagogical excellence have left an indelible mark on the institution, shaping future leaders in the legal domain. Moving to Saurabh Arora, a visionary entrepreneur and founder of University Living. He exemplifies the quintessence of youthful leadership. His platform has emerged as a game changer in the realm of student accommodation worldwide, providing students with a home away from home that supports their academic journey. We have Saurabh Nanda, whose passion for mentorship through SN mentoring has been a guiding light for learners navigating the complexities of their educational paths. His personalized and strategic mentorship has empowered students, fostering their growth and enabling them to achieve their potential. We have Aishwarya Rai, who stands at the forefront of the technological vanguard, harnessing her extensive expertise in artificial intelligence and software as a service, SaaS, to spearhead transformative changes in the educational technology sector. Her innovative approach and strategic vision, I would say, have been pivotal in crafting solutions that cater to the evolving and demands of modern education. And finally, we have Priyank Sharma. Priyank's role as an educator extends beyond traditional teaching, venturing into the development of innovative methodologies that redefine teacher training and educational practices. His creative approach has led to the design of cutting-edge programs that enrich the professional development of educators and in turn enhance student learning experiences. So this is our esteemed panel of speakers, and now let's formally begin the webinar. So Aishwarya, we will begin with you. So this is the first question. How is AI shaping the future of personalized learning in India? And what impact do you see it having on education inclusivity?
Yeah. So, like recently we saw that, the development in AI has been going on since a couple of years now. It has been nearly a decade. But till the past few years, it was very just like a very exclusive thing. Like AI was being used just to maybe play chess or excel at other kinds of strategy games. But especially with the new developments in natural language programming and with the coming along of ChatGPT and other technologies. So it kind of makes a great impact on introducing personalization in education. So more so because for example, if I have an app which will give me summaries of different books or summaries of different concepts. So that same summary can be explained to a 10-year-old in very simplistic and layman terms. And then if I am somebody who is 23, 24 years old, then it will be explained in a different style. So a lot of personalization can come in with the help of AI, and it will help to sort of have a more We call it the adaptive learning approach, where if I'm studying physics, for example, if I'm struggling to understand concepts, then sort of like, the AI can make the learning journey easier for me by explaining concepts more simplistically, by asking me more fundamental questions. Whereas if I am like an advanced learner, then it can sort of help me like, know more about more advanced or more complex type of topics. So given the same content, a lot of variations can be introduced in like, different learning styles, and this can also be diversified. So for example, if I am teaching certain content to Indian geography, then I will use very India specific examples like, of applications and other things. Whereas if I'm in the USA, then I will have, the opportunity to sort of style my content pertaining to the US audience, and it can be done really fast. Like I don't need to like, reinvent the wheel and make everything from scratch again. So that kind of like, is very futuristic. And with the advent of AI, the personalization aspect is going to be very much accelerated.
Excellent. I concur with that for sure. Moving to Dr. Upasana. So, how has legal education in India adapted to the EdTech revolution, and what benefits have you observed?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. See, the legal education in India had no choice but to adapt to the AI revolution, right? And as Aishwarya also spoke about that, the revolution in terms of technology that we see is not new. It has been happening for a decade, but pandemic sort of accelerated it. And because of the pandemic, one had to, whether you are in legal education or non-legal education, you had to adapt to technology, to AI, in order to be able to make sure that there is continuation of education. So I feel that the pandemic time period forced a lot of institutions, whether they were prepared or not, to move towards more AI-driven technologies and technological learning. So the Indian legal education did the same. We went into online mode of learning. We went into online assessments. Many who could have access to technology also started using, say, virtual reality or augmented reality. So there was a possibility to do a lot of immersive learning through the use of AI technologies. Of course, as someone who has been teaching in a law school, we also had challenges, and I would talk about them perhaps later when the question pops up, in terms of how do you do assessments. We had to have a lot of internal conversations about the most effective modes of assessment and evaluation when you're doing online mode of teaching, or you're trying to use advanced online tools for the teaching and learning process. But I think most part it enabled us to explore a way of doing teaching and learning which we did not think was possible. It was again possible for us to do a lot of collaborative work. For example, you could do a combined class with a partner university that is abroad, and the classrooms can come together. You can do a lot of co-teaching where you do not necessarily have to be in the same place. You can do conferences, you can do seminars where you can bring in people from various parts of the world without actually having to fly them down. So you suddenly have access to a whole host of possibilities in terms of legal education, which perhaps would not have been possible without the technologies that are available today. And if you look at it, there are two ways that it has happened. One at the level of legal education itself, but other at the level of how the courts and the legal systems adapted to technology and to online platforms. So if you see during the pandemic, courts have started doing online sessions, and online judgments were given. And the Supreme Court of India has also been very cautiously trying to use AI and going the AI way. They're using AI technology. They've done a pilot project where they use AI and natural language processing for live transcriptions. The Supreme Court's also used machine learning tools for translating judgments into other languages. So it enhances the accessibility of judgments, right? So in that case, you can actually very effectively use AI tools in terms of the benefits that you're asking. But there are also a number of challenges that we are trying to overcome. But I know there's limited time and the other panelists need to speak, but perhaps we could come back to address that as well.
No, that's all very good. I think starting discussion for sure, and we have seen the use cases definitely, and we can only imagine that what AI will now bring to the future legal systems. Coming to Saurabh Arora, so we have two Saurabhs here. So yes, so Saurabh, from your entrepreneurial perspective, how is EdTech influencing the way higher education institutions in India support their students?
Sure. Thank you and morning, everyone. Um, I would say never been so excited and happy ever in my last 17 years of entrepreneur journey or my career. Never been a phase where there's a government in India which is stable. We got an intent to implement technology and change the way Indians and the institution been working or learning. Again by the virtue of being fortunate to to build and scale 3 startups for now, which is startup from India for global audience, have seen the journey from someone wherein even to have a classroom or a digital projector in a Delhi University class to someone where everyone is forced or designed or probably planned in such a way wherein now there are opportunities, there are people are well connected, there's best of faculties out there which can be accessible. Keeping that in mind, building startups and scaling startups have become, I wouldn't say easier. Definitely there's lots of challenge, there's competition, there's challenge, but the way institution been using EdTech, and also before talking about EdTech, in many places EdTech been a bit loosely abused. EdTech is beyond apps and gadgets. EdTech is just not like a platform where you bring all the information and that's EdTech. That has been used in India, that okay, EdTech is collaborating all the information and which all the AI the process which is happening with AI. Now information is not knowledge. And that's where lots of EdTech which have been building really well, and there are some EdTech which they define them as EdTech. So we need to be very clear what EdTech is. It's beyond the gadgets and devices, and it has to be learning. It has to be personalization. Why I'm saying this, because we've been considered as EdTech. Wherein we as a founder of University Living, which is a global managed marketplace, we are a beautifully amalgamation of EdTech, PropTech, and travel tech. So someone who comes to me, what are you doing at tech? So I'm very clear that I'm not a pseudo entrepreneur, I'm not a pseudo educator. I'm very clear I'm a part of a ecosystem which is EdTech, wherein how we are enabling or helping students learn in India or across the globe. So keeping it short and going back to the same question, that in last 12 years of my entrepreneur journey, the way private and public universities, not only private, even the public universities, the way they have adopted technology, and also probably put across resources and intent to transform internal faculty as well as students, and with their collaboration mindset, never been so excited to be part of a journey wherein there are 40 million students on a higher education which out there need to learn, and we need to create a youth which is just not holding a degree but they have skills. So this is that time wherein whether you're going to IITs or whether you're going to a private institute, if you have the will and intent to learn, you have technology, you have YouTube, you have AI, and you can do wonders. And I'm a quintessential example of that. Before this session, in an internal discussion we were having, that probably I'm one of the most less educated person on the panel, right? But then now degrees are not which will define you. It's about learning, and you can learn anything, everything by the virtue of having technology and AIs and internet at your palm. Thank you.
Thanks, Saurabh. I definitely agree. I think that I have to say is that EdTech is not just nowadays the adaptation is to open a platform and become an EdTech. So definitely that's not what EdTech is. But now, during the discussion further, Priyanka, I'm coming to you. What teaching innovation have you implemented or observed that exemplify the EdTech revolution in India?
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you for the question. So, see, when it comes to teaching innovations, I think there have been many. If you start counting, I think we will not have much time. So probably we started with online learning platforms, Unacademy, Khan Academy. We had gamified learning platforms like Kahoot, then AI tutoring systems like QMath, and then adaptive learning systems like Dreambox and others. So when it comes to innovation, probably we have been evolving and there's a lot more to go. But I think I'll go back and check ourselves when we say, when do we call something as a tech revolution? And when do we say what is innovation really meaning for someone? So I think we'll have to understand that, when we say EdTech revolution, we can only say it so when it reaches the larger mass. And in fact, there was a recent study in the US where they found that only 2% of people actually use EdTech tools in classroom. So, and when we think of the larger, paradigm of EdTech, how it is reaching the poorest of the poor or the last mile, I think we need to reevaluate what do we even call revolution as such. And for that, and in that respect, if we really want EdTech to make changes, I think one of the key aspects that EdTech is trying to do, or possibly has to do, is cater to people in their own language. There have been applications and software coming up. People are trying to develop so that people are taught and they learn in their own language different aspects. Like there is an application DifFit which is even giving us lesson plans for teachers in Bhojpuri language, Bengali language. So I think we'll have to revisit when it comes to revolution, and if you want to reach the last mile, I think there has to be particular focus in terms of innovations in how do you reach people in their own language.
Great. I mean, that's a very valid point. You said that we have to really define what counts as a revolution. So I think there have to be some metrics that we can discuss later on. Moving to Saurabh Nanda, how do you see mentorship? Because you are a career mentor yourself. So how do you see mentorship evolving with the development or advancement of EdTech tools and platforms?
Thank you, Abhinav. So first of all, let me just kind of put this out there, and before I begin giving the answer, I feel tech is an enabler. It's not the replacement for education professionals. All right, and there's another guy, Bill Gates, who agrees with me on this. So when we talk about using tools to improve accessibility of education, absolutely right. Then technology has changed the way we do things. In my practice, in fact, this second startup of mine was only possible because we went into a pandemic and everyone had to move online. So we got the chance of creating a digital first, remote first company which caters to students all over the country, and we have clients from Europe and Japan as well. That would not have been possible if I had a physical office somewhere in Delhi or Chandigarh or anywhere else. So that way, Zoom definitely helped me, WhatsApp definitely helped me, Google Drive definitely helps me, YouTube helps me, and Zoho definitely helps me. But then are these platforms really EdTech platforms, or are these just tech platforms which are helping professionals like me provide better services? So when we use the term EdTech, we need to be a little careful about it. Because the same kind of technology, and I feel the other, Aishwarya might agree with this, the same kind of technology can be used for different industries over here, which can include education as one of the industries, right? However, coming to the answer to the question that you asked, how has it helped us? Immensely. It has helped us increase the accessibility of our services. It has helped us in reaching out to more and more students, more and more parents. It has changed the behavior of the consumerism around educational services. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to talk to a conservative family from a small town in India who would not be willing to pay money to somebody who's living thousands of kilometers apart from them, right? So conservative in that sense. So those things have definitely changed. But apart from that, I see that technology has to move to the next level in order to be really called an EdTech when it comes to mentorship.
Great. And I have a follow-up to that, to what you just spoke. So do you think that EdTech also carries or it will be instrumental in making education accessible at a grassroots level? Speaking particularly about India, let's say going to tier 3, tier 4 cities.
I definitely believe so. The government of India has been putting in a lot of effort towards this. There is a national digital library based out of IIT Kharagpur. There is Swayam education system, which is probably the biggest collection of all e-learning courses in India right now. But then the problem is, what is the usage of it, right? So when we say that now things are accessible to you, that doesn't really translate into usability also. Everyone knows there are a lot of excellent YouTube platforms out there. A lot of professors like Dr. Upasana have shared a lot of knowledge free of cost on YouTube. But then how many of our youth are actually going towards that particular knowledge, rather than choosing some entertainment, right? So YouTube primarily is still an entertainment platform and not really an education platform. However, the accessibility has definitely increased. The shift in behavior will probably take more time to catch up with it.
Got it. Sounds great. All right. Thanks, Saurabh. Let me come back to Aishwarya for second round of our questions. So Aishwarya, we spoke about EdTech. So now let's move to SaaS, software as a service. So what role do SaaS platforms play in democratizing education across India's diverse student population? How do you see that?
Yeah. So I think first point to note on that, like as Saurabh mentioned that, while everyone in India does have access to internet and access to mobile phones, but like the majority of the people and majority of the students and youth are sort of less inclined towards learning about things which is going to help them develop their skill set, and it's more inclined towards entertainment as of now. So I think when you talk about SaaS, which is software as a service, so that kind of means that, okay, I can subscribe to sort of a learning platform, and just with the availability of internet and mobile phones all across our country, so that has really helped to sort of democratize education in the way that earlier, maybe 10-20 years from 10-20 years before from now, it would be really expensive to sort of know about if you want to go to some institute to study, or if you want to get a degree or a training program, then it used to cost a lot to know about those things. As I remember, maybe 10-15 years back, they would take nearly 50,000 rupees just for Java training, and now that is totally free. You can just learn it on your own. So in that way, just the availability of internet, mobile phones, SaaS and technology helps a lot in sort of making this a very leveled playing field where everyone is more or less starting from a very equal position. And this also helps in sort of making education accessible to areas which were earlier considered very underdeveloped and very remote. And many of the times there are many sections of our society, for example, people belonging to the backward sections, and people if the underprivileged class, or women who are not even allowed to enroll in school, and they are not given the freedom also to sort of educate themselves. So for them, having these softwares as service and having this online era of EdTech is very helpful to make education more accessible to them. And especially ever since technologies like 5G and Geo and everything have come along. So because of that, it has become very easy to sort of deliver very cost-effective solutions. You can just purchase an internet pack for really cheap and get to know about a lot of things. And I mean, of course, it also helps in sort of language diversity, that many lessons you can find in your native language as well, and you don't really need to know and learn everything if for example English may not be like your most preferred language. And then of course, like even in terms of this increasing the employment, so if there are teachers, like for example there will be many people who are not allowed to go to work and stuff like that because of like some limitations at home or other kinds of complexities, so they can still get that employment by becoming online tutors if they do know about a certain field and so on. So in that way, like it has helped to remove a lot of like disparity which exists between different sections of the society, and makes it a more uniform and level playing field for everyone.
No, absolutely. I think definitely, as you just said. So I think SaaS is acting as a catalyst, and we all spoke about accessibility because I think that's the key. Because EdTech and SaaS ultimately will only make sense if they are able to drive accessibility. But again, there is this behavior aspect of, I would say, the audience to which this EdTech is accessible, that is strongly attached. We tackle that behavioral aspect. I think the digital penetration will still remain not very, I would say, resultive in a sense that it will make a greater impact. And that's what I'll move on based on that to Dr. Upasna, because this has to link with what you just spoke in your initial question. So you mentioned about the innovative teaching methods that Digital University has employed for, I would say, adapting EdTech into legal education. So this question is related to that. Can you tell us more about those innovative teaching methods that are being employed that you feel are enhancing the learning experience of students at Digital University?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I would also want to take forward what has been talked about so far by other panelists. So I'll try and keep it two-pronged. One, of course, I spoke about the various kind of blended learning possibilities that are there, combined classes. At OP Jindal Global University now, we have a blended LLM in corporate and financial law with Upgrad. We have blended MBA with Upgrad. We've launched courses with Coursera. One master's in public policy, one is master's in international relations, strategy and security, and one is another MBA program in data analytics. So it makes it possible to have all of these blended learning platforms. And of course, I already spoke about the combined classes. I already spoke about new and innovative methods of assessments. So I don't want to repeat that, but I also feel that because we are an institution of eminence, because I think it is an important point to talk about. See, all platforms, EdTech platforms, blended learning platforms are not reliable platforms. There are a lot of platforms out there that are increasingly problematic and dubious. In fact, the government of India has come up with an advisory to people saying that, these are the checklists and do not trust in all such platforms. We are an institution of eminence. So under the UGC, we can give blended learning master's degrees and LLM degrees and MBA degrees that are recognized degrees. And I think at some point we spoke about the distinction between degree and learning. And it is an important distinction to be made. But we also have to think about where are these people going to go and get jobs? Right? It is not an easy conversation to have. Everybody is not going to be an entrepreneur. Everybody is not going to have a startup. Everybody does not have the potential of using the learning in the right way when it comes to the world of jobs. That is one. The second is India is a very divided country when it comes to internet. Only 42% of urban India has access to internet. Only 15% of rural India has access to internet. It does have, what Aishwarya said is true, that it does have the potential of inclusive learning. It does have the potential of making education accessible and technology accessible, but potential does not necessarily always translate into something concrete because one doesn't even have access to internet technologies. And one may have an Amazon Prime on their phone, but that does not necessarily mean that one is using technology in order to be able to access new and innovative methods of learning. And also, we have to understand that we live in an extremely hierarchical, often patriarchal context. So, women may have access and may even know that I have access to this kind of learning, but what kind of learning can they do? How are they able to employ those learnings? These are questions that we have to address. I mean, while an institution like JGU and many other both public and private institutions have very successfully gone into blended learning and online learning in the context of the pandemic, it is also true that millions of children in India fell out of the education system after the pandemic and have never gotten back. It is also true that millions of women in India have lost jobs during the pandemic and have never gotten it back. That children and women were at the forefront of bearing the disproportionate burden, both of the pandemic and the post-pandemic context of a lack of jobs and lack of access to formal contractual jobs that one sees. So that is also a reality we live in. So while EdTech and these platforms do have tremendous potential, and some of us who have access to resources, both material and otherwise, have very successfully using this, both for the purpose of innovative methods of teaching and learning and blended learning. I feel that if we want to think about EdTech or technology or use of blended learning in truly egalitarian terms, that we have to change the conversation. We have to start at the bottom and start talking about making basic access to internet accessible to people. We have to, as one of our co-panelists very clearly said, it cannot be an substitute for the kind of teaching and learning that we've traditionally done. It can when we are all empowered to have access to that. Right now, we are not in that position. So there has to be a much more conversation about educating people. There has to be conversation about what are the right modes of even doing blended learning. There are a lot of sprouting of these platforms where people are just given certificates and degrees and qualifications which they can't do anything with it once they have that. So it also people lose faith on such platforms. We have to re-educate the people who ultimately would employ these people. So what are they looking at? Unless and until we are having this conversation, then it will be a very superficial rejoicing with the idea that, oh my God, we have arrived at the scene of EdTech. We clearly haven't. There's a long way to go. This is the right start. And I'm glad that people and educators like all of you have come together to have this conversation. But it has to happen in a much more nuanced manner. I'll stop there.
No, absolutely, Dr. Mahanta, that was a big, I would say, discourse on this particular pain point. And that's what I just want to say, touch base here, that this is what the essence of Bharat Shiksha Sankalp is, because the idea is to close or remove these disparities that exist, right? At the superficial level or let's say at the top of the pyramid level, we talked about that now Indians have access to 5G technologies, 100 Mbps data speeds and all that. But when we go down and when we go to grassroots level, let's say government schools or schools in some underprivileged states or localities, we all have seen that there is gross disparities. So this initiative is to take these discussions and take them to the real, I would say, policymakers, people who have got those powers, people who have got those, I would say, admin controls, and then make the right decisions. It will not happen overnight, we all know that. But then, yes, we have an audience system in it. And there will be nuances to it, but I think we are on the right path with these kind of initiatives. We have an audience member, so I just want to comment or say to her. So we will take the question at the end. So Shivani Shah, we will come back to you right after all the panelists have completed their questions. Thank you so much. Okay, so Priyank, coming to you. So as a faculty, so now how can teacher training programs evolve to prepare educators for the rapidly changing EdTech landscape? As Dr. Upasana just mentioned about that, how EdTech cannot be a true replacer.
Yeah, I think different like all the co-panelists have already somehow addressed the question. See, in my first answer, I was trying to ask this question that when we say edtech for whom, and then here we have to ask the question, who is that teacher? So when we say we have to prepare a teacher, who is that teacher? Where is that teacher located? Because, as Saurav said that, edtech is an enabler, yes, of course. But who is the teacher in that context? Because realities of the context can only be addressed by that enabler. And the realities of context are very varied. So while I want to say that, yes, like in Teacher Training Institute, we should have integration of technologies, hands-on workshops, and how to use different applications and everything. But so I would say we first look at the history. So if we go back and think about when we had internet, let's say, and how internet changed things, how there was access again. But people really use that access as it was supposed to? So history tells us that we have to prepare every individual in that manner that they are able to use it judiciously. So learning from that, I think when we look at here, I think we need to understand the teachers should be prepared to understand that, yes, we have tools. For example, let's say one of the biggest problem which teachers face is feedback. They want the students to learn. How do I personalize feedback and let students learn on their own pace because they have a class of 30, 40, 50 children? Now a simple aspect can be solved using technology. And if we make it more personalized, if we make it more contextual, we can, probably reach it to some of the more remote contexts as such. But then again, it is the teacher who has to make sure that, in that context, these are the realities, these are the aspects. So they should be trained in multiple ways. One is, of course, how to use that technology, but also to prepare themselves to utilize it in a certain context. And that, I think, as I said, we can learn from the history that how things have changed over time. And lastly, I think there has to be larger collaboration between industry and, academia as such when it comes to teachers and industry. So it can't be that there is one sector which is, there is evolution happening. You have tools after tools after tools, and the other is, not sure whether it can be used in certain context or not. So I think if we take these in consideration, it will be great.
Great. Absolutely agree. Saurav Arora, I'm coming to you. How has the student housing sector, because you come from an accommodation platform, so how has the student housing sector had to adapt to the changing needs of students in this digital era? That how students are searching for rooms, looking for accommodation. How has that scene evolved?
Right. Let me take a couple of minutes to explain about student housing. Because first of all, thank you. We will talk about internet, academics, degrees, but no one talks about housing. And housing is an enabler, right? Wherein there are 80 million students all across the globe at one point in time who's looking for accommodation, out of which around 7 million international students which need accommodation anyhow, because most of the universities, international and I come to India landscape, they don't have enough accommodation. And surprisingly or interestingly, no one is talking about accommodation unless until global warming and housing crisis become real. I'm a perfect example of that. Went back to Nottingham in 2011 on exchange program, didn't get my housing, stayed in a hotel for 1.5 months. And I don't come from a very privileged, very rich family, as per se, right? But and that's probably, I've been fortunate that I got a purpose of my life, that I need to accommodate 10 million students in a safe, secure, value for money accommodation, right? Especially, as I mentioned, in India, there are 40 million students, out of which there are only 7 to 8 million beds with universities. With private players coming in, another 2 million, 3 million. There are like huge shortage of safe, secure, and value for money accommodation. I'm not talking about premium accommodation. I'll come to digital era of that. But this is the gap which government, private institutes, and all of us need to come together and work on. And first thing start with, let's accept that there's a housing crisis, and it's as important as any digitally enabled classroom. Because 45% of overall spend, a student who come from a tier 2 or tier 3 city on an institute like OP Jindal or probably any world class university, they need to be on campus. And we all know that education is just not degrees and academics. It's a comprehensive experience which is based on community learning, which is based on, I'm sure most of us might have not remembered some concept we learned in that class, but definitely are in touch or remember our friends, families, or probably crushes we have on our campuses, right? So that's the importance of housing, and now let me throw some numbers from an India context. So as per the National Center of Education Statistics, there are, as of 2020, only 29% of undergrad students live on campus. This was 53% in 1980. Definitely we have made lots of progress. A report by GLL in 2023, global student housing market will reach value of 180 billion overall. But in a report by Cushman Wakefield in 2022 states that 74% students globally seek internet speeds of minimum 100 Mbps. Now let me come back to digital era. So now, I've studied from Delhi University. Getting a room in hostel was privilege, and we know why. Then got an opportunity to go to Nottingham, again did my housing, but I realized that there's a reason why no one talking about housing, and it's not just institutions. There's a government involved, there is private developers involved, there's a whole ecosystem that needs to come together and work on it, which in last 10 years have done leaps and bounds have happened in last 10 years in student housing globally, right? But yet, so much still needs to be done. So, gone are the days when housing was just brick and buildings. We talk about EdTech, we talk about enablement, right? But we still struggle basic internet in, as Dr. Pasna also mentioned, there are only 42.7% people in India who got access to internet. And without internet, whether it's tech, AI, EdTech, it's not possible, right? Hence, before we talk about technology enablement, we need to accept that hybrid and phygital, as we call it, phygital and digital is not the future, it's reality, and that's why most of tech are from online going to offline, student experience centers and whatnot, which is good, because I'm sure, I have a 3 years daughter. I don't want my daughter to be always on the screen. In fact, last week only, due to cold in North India, the school have no other option but to go back to screens. And at home, me and my wife are avoiding to give screens to our students, right? So, that's the reality. And going back to, what student housing needs to be in a digital era. First of all, high connectivity, then it's just not, as I mentioned, just not bricks and buildings, but a community, so we need to talk about well-being. We keep talking about well-being and mental health, but when we are on the screen all the time, not meeting physical people, we all know what we all go through. Pandemic, there was no choice, but now we don't see students out in the ground playing. And then we talk about exercise, and when we talk about mental health, so we have to put student housing in an overall digital enablement or a transformation we are talking about, So there are lots of facts and figures which I want to talk, but I know there's a paucity of time, so I stop myself, and probably we can connect offline, or I'm happy to, I'm very active on LinkedIn and digital. So anything, and this is my passion, I can talk about housing for years and hours. So I'll stop there, and then probably, we talk and take next question. Over to you.
Thanks, Saurabh. I think, yes, absolutely. The problem lies sort of is that education is never seen as an ecosystem. It is always seen just as an academic qualification, and it will got this qualifications. But education cannot stand just as a standalone academic institution without the complete ecosystem driving it. And that's another topic that we will bring up sometime on Bharat Shiksha Sankalp. But Saurabh Nanda, I'm coming to you. In what ways you have leveraged technology to enhance the mentor-mentee relationship?
Thank you, Abhinav. In a lot of ways, actually. So, as I said, accessibility was one of the major challenges earlier. Even in an offline setting, you don't have access to your mentor, teacher, counselor on a regular basis. But what we have done is we internally call it asynchronous mentorship, which basically means that if there is a question which is asked to us on one of the connection platforms, it can be a WhatsApp group, it can be email, etc. There is usually somebody present to answer that question within a couple of hours, and it is not it is actually an unsaid SLA within our team, because we are passionate mentors. We want to help. If somebody is with us, then we give it our all to make sure that there is a success route created for them, right? So that is one way. The other way is the knowledge sharing has become so much easier, and it has actually become very outcome oriented, which doesn't used to happen earlier. So yes, after the telecom revolution started happening in India and everyone had access to phones, you could call people up and you could chat on SMS, but there was not be a accountability mechanism as to what we talked about, and was there work done around it, was there an accountability around it or not, right? Which would only exist in big corporate setups, but now it is easily available for everyone. So we are able to do that quite well. However, there are still things which work better offline, and we are absolutely open about it. We tell, when parents say, will it work online? I said, yes, it will work online to a certain extent, but then there has to be something offline. So I being from a computer science background, I actually mentor engineering students from all over the world, some 35 plus countries so far, in using technology for good, right? And I've held multiple sessions in almost every continent on the planet. But the one that I cherished the most was last year, when we could actually go to Istanbul and then work with 30 Turkish engineering students to work on the technology part of it. Even though they are all engineers, they understand technology, they are digital natives, they would use the technology to do things, they are absolutely comfortable on Zoom calls, etc., etc., etc. But the conversations that we had over a table, sipping Turkish coffee, those were the ones which really created impact. What I'm trying to say is that you can take the mentor-mentee relationship to a certain point, but what we are trying to do now, and we are struggling with it, to be honest, I hope some technologist listens to it and maybe create something out of it. What we're trying to do, or trying to create now, is a physical in-person meeting set up, maybe once a year, maybe once in a few months, just to make that mentor-mentee relationship really strong, because that motivation will take the mentee to the next level.
Okay. So I think it all boils down to the fact that virtual is good, EdTech is good, but it must be supported by a physical in-person meeting. Without that, it will never be effective and efficient, I would say. Aishwarya, coming to you, I've asked the audience to put their questions in the chat box. I'll pick them up once they come through. So Aishwarya, can you share an example or a case study where we can say that EdTech has successfully transformed our learning environment in India?
Yeah. So I think on that, there are many sort of EdTech startups right now available in India, catering both to K-12 sector and also to higher education and also for exam preparation. So there'll be a couple of them like that, like Unacademy is one, Khan Academy is another, Upgrad is another one. So there are all these different avenues where people can sort of enroll themselves. And I do agree that sometimes the programs offered by them may not be very much extremely affordable for people who will be in the more rural backgrounds, or maybe people who will be of below average economic strata. So it may be a bit difficult for them to afford that. But at the same time, there are these really large EdTech startups. So for example, Udemy is one, which is a very, very global EdTech startup, and their courses are generally quite affordable. Their courses are not 50,000 rupees or 2 lakhs or something like that. Their courses will be 400, 500 rupees. You can still manage to sort of, set aside some amount to sort of learn that particular skill and also be able to gain some certificate and stuff. And especially for people who, especially some of the younger population these days They have got to know about software development and programming in general. So they are like really interested to learn about all those things. And the fortunate thing about programming is that it doesn't require any computer science degree. It doesn't require you to have previous work experience in any big companies and stuff. If you have projects to show for yourself that hey, I made this thing which helps do this particular task or some any other thing, then you qualify as a good programmer, as a good IT admin, and many of those other occupations. So in that way, just being able to learn via these online sources has helped to a large extent. But at the same time, this the one or two problems that in the newspapers we might read, or in the advertisements we might see that everyone has internet access and stuff, but those numbers are quite skewed many of the times, and a considerable amount of population still is not having internet access. So that is one problem. And of course, another problem being is that there's just too much of entertainment and social media apps everywhere that people are not motivated or encouraged to know about those skills. So that is also another problem. But of course, there are ways to overcome that. So for example, Duolingo is one app which is if you want to learn a language in it, it is very, very fun, and it works in the form of playing a game and stuff like that. You get an adventure feeling. So that kind of helps. So if we that kind of helps to sort of make the concepts a bit more entertaining and a bit more engaging. So yeah, I think those are just a couple of examples which can sort of drive the education, especially in the technology part of it.
Absolutely. Great examples. And I think all of the co-panelists here will agree that there are some really good platforms and service providers out there which are doing amazing work at the grassroots level. Seeing the shortage of time, Dr. Upasana, I'm coming to you for a very important question, because this one I really wanted to discuss and have your thoughts. So we speak about the underrepresented communities in India. So how do you think that EdTech can facilitate better access to legal education, or let's say education per se, for underrepresented communities in India?
Well, Avinav, again, one of the things that EdTech will have to do, and of course, it depends on what kind of education you're doing. For example, Aishwarya talked about, say, an Unacademy or a Khan Academy or a Byju's, right? They do a different kind of education, right? A different kind of access to material. When you're talking about legal education, now say a BA LLB degree or a BB LLB degree or an LLM degree. A BA LLB degree is a terminal degree, right? So there are, so EdTech platform, how adequate that platform is to be able to do it purely in an online way. Because these are also praxis-based program. It would require contact hours. It will require internships. It would require certain kind of mentoring and hand-holding. So, for example, at OP Jindal Global University, all our blended learning programs are LLM programs or MBA programs. And largely people who are coming in with some kind of work experience, who have done it in the past, who wants to do a 1 year, LLM in tax law, wants to do an MBA in data analytics, to enhance their mid-level careers and to enhance their skills. Right. So one has to think about that. And as we've already discussed it, we've said that, the access, 42% is an overall access. Only 15% in rural India have access to internet. So when you're talking about underprivileged, education in India, we have to again do a very bottom-up approach. Right? A bottom-up approach means that you have to start from creating structures and mechanisms where there is, first basic requirement is having access to internet, right? Only one in 10,000 households in India have a computer or a tablet or any form of such gadget. So one has to, before we start talking about inclusivity and accessibility at that level, one has to create inclusivity and accessibility in terms of access to the gadget itself, right? That is one thing. And I feel, and we didn't have time to discuss it in this panel, but I hope Perhaps we can have a panel discussion on itself, on this topic itself later, is this whole conversation about regulation of the EdTech sector. So there is this entire conversation now about creating regulatory mechanisms for EdTech. And the government is taking it very, very seriously. The complaint is that, that EdTech platforms give misleading ads, and there are data and privacy violations by EdTech platforms, and therefore there's a need of a regulatory framework. As I said, in December 2021, the government created a public advisory with do's and don'ts for consumers in considering EdTech platforms. Okay, and it cited the Consumer Protection E-commerce rules of 2020. And then in January 2022, the Ministry of Education said that it would formulate regulations for the EdTech industry. So what the EdTech industry did, it created the Indian EdTech Consortium, and it developed self-regulating rules, right? But despite that, there is, because in 2022, there is this body called the Advertising Standard Council of India. So in 2022, they came up with a report, and they said that the education sector, including the EdTech, it was the single largest violative sector. Said that a third of all complaints from consumer was about misleading advertising by the EdTech sector. So there is this entire conversation right now about creating regulatory framework, creating laws and regulations for the EdTech sector. Now, what kind of frameworks will that be? What kind of impact would it have on the existing EdTech platforms or the mushrooming EdTech platforms? What kind of guidelines, frameworks will be there? That will also, I think, in the years to come, would lead to a reimagination of the consumer engagement with EdTech platforms. So I think that is also one conversation we need to have, because all of us have stakes in that conversation. So that would be my concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mahanta. I think definitely I have taken the note of your point, so I'll keep that topic for upcoming Bharat Shiksha Sankalp sessions, and I'll try to bring in policymakers, primarily from the government, on that panel, so that we can have, I would say, a real-time knowledge that what the government is trying to do of putting a curb on this menace. And definitely there is a menace out in the system, for sure. We all know that. So now we are only 2 minutes away from the closing of the webinar. I think one of our audience members, Shivani, she had put a comment or a chat in chat box. All this depends on the learning behavior of child, achievement, motivation, person's efforts to master the task. I think no specific question, but I think it's primarily related to what we all have discussed, that it all boils down to the behavioral aspect, that how we want to assimilate that into the system. So I think I will not be able to ask any more questions, so we'll just progress to the concluding remarks. Thank you all. So I think this was really an insightful session, and we have to bring it to a close. I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to all the esteemed speakers, panelists, and an engaged audience. This is being live streamed as well. So your thoughts and interactions today have truly embodied the transformative spirit of the EdTech revolution in India. I can definitely see that you all are very passionate about what you are doing in your respective fields. Looking ahead, I'm also excited to invite you all to the Eduverse Summit India 2024, which is one of India's largest summits taking place at JW Marriott AeroCity on 31st August, where we are bringing together global and Indian institutions along with leading dignitaries from the government for some pivotal discussions to decide the future of education in India. I encourage you all to register and join for the upcoming sessions of Bharat Shiksha Sankalp as well. Thank you all. Thank you, Saurabh Nanda. Thank you, Saurabh Arora. Thank you, Dr. Mahanta. Thank you, Priyank. Thank you, Aishwarya. Thank you all for joining today. And I look forward to seeing you all on future sessions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abhinav.
Thank you.
Great, Abhinav. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.